So again, welcome to this month's Milestone 15-minute feature Friday on Expertech Smart Client Design and Best Practices. So we're going to go over smart client design considerations as well as discuss support for hardware acceleration that Milestone introduced beginning with our 2016 R1 release of our smart client. So I'm Rob Bridges, Milestone Pre-Sales Solutions Engineer for Mid-South and the Gulf regions, and with me is Andrew Markle. So Andrew, introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. As Rob said, my name is Andrew Markle. I'm also another solutions engineer. I'm based out of the Southwest, covering Nevada, California, or Southern California and Arizona.
All right, cool. Very good. Let's get started. So I'm going to go over and cover what factors to consider in designing a smart client workstation. And then Andrew will go over hardware acceleration, what it means and what hardware acceleration is available to us when using Milestone Smart Client. And then there will be a short demo and questions at the end. All right, so when it comes to video viewing workstations, and they're very demanding on computer hardware since video streams need to be decoded, whether they're H.264, 265, and then they need to be rendered and displayed on the connected monitor or monitors. That takes a bit of horsepower to accomplish and provide the best viewing experience for the user, right? Most of us have been in a situation where you or the end user experiences sluggish or choppy video. This is not good when there's been a large investment into the cameras and hardware of a system, and then the viewing experience is not up to the expectation because the computer, the hardware used to display and view the videos is not up to the task, right? So when that happens, when you're having that bad user experience, what happens at this point is the system gets blamed, right? Or it is thought that there's something wrong with the server hardware. In our case, the recording server. You'll hear, oh, the recording server's not up to speed, or it's this or it's that. Or worse, it's the software itself. There's something wrong with the system. But actually what's going on, and much of the time, is that it comes down to the hardware that the smart client is actually running on, right? The video is choppy and sluggish, and that can be corrected with the correct workstation design, and we try to get up front on this. What may have happened in the system is the viewing workstation was an afterthought, and maybe it was a PC that the IT department had left over, or they dug it out of a closet, and it was old, it was outdated, but this is what you had available, and it was just install the software and run with it. Okay. Or maybe it was the correct design up front. Maybe it's a few years old and it was all right when it was designed, but the cameras were changed over time. Maybe now we've changed out those original 640 by 480 VGA cameras, and now we're running 3 megapixel cameras on the system, but the workstation hasn't changed, but it's been 3-4 years or something like that. Or after the fact, the customer decided that when we designed it around a certain video streams, resolutions, and frame rates and things, and now we've changed the system and the workstation, or you'll get that complaint of, well, it used to work okay, but over time it just gets worse or it's more sluggish. So again, the idea behind this is let's get out in front of this design. It's not an afterthought anymore. Let's take into these factors. Let's get the workstations for smart clients out there up front. So there we go. So basic considerations. If you contact Milestone Pre-Sales, these are the kind of questions that we're going to ask you for assistance in helping you put a workstation together. First of all is just the real basic. How many monitors are you going to have connected to the system, right? This does come into play because, again, the hardware has to render the video to these monitors. So 1 to 4 is more common. Obviously, you can go higher depending if the hardware can support that. The number of video streams that we're discussing or that we're taking into consideration on each of these monitors. If we've got 1 monitor and we've got 16 video streams, or we've got 4 monitors and we've got 16 or more video streams on each monitor, right? So that's the video streams that come into play. Then we have to talk about the resolution. So we've got 1080 video streams or 1080p video streams, and we've got 4 of them on a monitor. Well, then we want to possibly display 4K video, right? So we're talking 4 times the resolution a lot more horsepower to decode that video stream, render it, display it on a monitor. So you can kind of get the idea where we're going here, where the resolution, everything that comes into play here can really bring a monitoring workstation to its knees, right? So lastly, we talk about frames per second of the video stream. So again, how many monitors, how many video streams, what's the resolution of those video streams, how many frames per second? All of those things come into play that you need to think about and that we need to consider if we're assisting you in trying to design a smart client workstation. And then the last thing that's not really on this slide, but do you have hardware acceleration available? Because with the advent of hardware acceleration over the past few years, and it continues to advance, this is making that workstation more powerful, where we can display more video streams at higher resolutions, and that type of thing. So again, these are the things that we need to take into consideration. Try to get out in front of that design, or if it's something that you have to go in after the fact for an existing system, this is the information that you need to consider, what we need to consider, and what we can put together to help you have the optimum viewing experience for the customer and for the end user. Right. This last little note here is we talk about smart client workstations, but this also comes into play. This is the exact same design considerations that we have when we're talking about smart walls. So with the ExpertTech, Milestone ExpertTech, when we're using smart walls, those are essentially smart client workstations that are driving those monitors, right? So now Andrew's going to go into a little bit more detail on the smart client hardware acceleration, what's available to us. We talk about Intel QuickSync, NVIDIA GPUs, and a short demo at the end. So, Andrew, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. So yeah, as Rob mentioned, now we're going to go ahead and go over hardware acceleration, what it is, and basically how this can impact your smart client design as well as your performance. So first thing I want to talk about is actually what hardware acceleration is. So we've had a couple of different iterations to hardware acceleration and some improvements to our hardware acceleration capabilities over the past couple of years. Now, the first time that we actually released hardware acceleration was back in 2016, and that was utilizing the Intel's QuickSync feature, which basically what Intel QuickSync is, for those of you who are not familiar, is a feature that can utilize the built-in GPU. And it basically, for select CPUs, what it can do is it can offload the decoding of the video from the CPU and put it onto the GPU. Now we've actually done the same thing, but we've done it for NVIDIA video cards. So basically now what we're able to do is take that same concept, utilize one or multiple NVIDIA video cards, and we can go ahead and utilize them to decode H.264 or H.265 video streams that are coming in, and basically offload a lot of that CPU load and put them and utilize the video cards. So not only does it help manage your resources on the machine, but then it also does help really impact the performance of the client, which will of course help the frame rates of the different cameras, make sure that it doesn't get choppy, like Rob was saying earlier. But then it does also make sure that the client itself is a lot more responsive as well. Now, to utilize this feature, there's a couple of different requirements from the NVIDIA portion. First of all, you have to consider the video card itself that you're going to go ahead and select. And basically what we do for a rough guide is to consider what GPU architecture it belongs to. Now, this is something that you can find, just by doing a quick Google search or on NVIDIA's site, and you can see what GPU architecture each video card utilizes. We do also have a reference article, which I'll reference again at the end of this presentation, and I'll put it up in chat for you guys to make sure that you can have a quick link for a version of that. But you can go ahead and reference this to go ahead and see basically what you need for your system. So first question should be, what type of video are you utilizing? Are you using H.264 cameras or H.265 cameras? H.264 cameras, you do need a minimum of Kepler series and up to be able to actually decode this type of video. H.265 needs the Pascal series and up to be able to decode the video. And another consideration to take too is that a 64-bit version of Windows is actually needed to go ahead and utilize this feature. If there is a 32-bit version of Windows and you also have the other requirements for Intel QuickSync, then it will automatically go ahead and just fall back to the Intel QuickSync version of hardware acceleration instead. And on that note, now that we've covered NVIDIA hardware acceleration requirements, let's actually take a step back and go over the Intel QuickSync requirements. So there's a couple of different things that you need to consider when putting this together. One, you have to make sure that the CPU specified for the workstation actually supports the Intel QuickSync feature. And basically, most standard desktop processors are going to actually support this. Basically, anything that's Sandy Bridge and up, and just kind of put it more layman's terms as anything that's your basic i3s, i5s, i7s. Most of those that are from a desktop are going to support those. There's a couple of exceptions. Sometimes there's a few different special CPUs, like mobile versions. Some of those may support Intel QuickSync, some of them may not. So ultimately, the best way is to actually go onto Intel's site, and there's a search function, and you can actually filter by whether that processor supports QuickSync video or not. There's a quick link there on the on this slide, but that's also included as part of our hardware acceleration guide that we have on our website. And again, that'll be part of the end of this, where we'll go ahead and call out different references that we have for considerations for hardware acceleration and smart client design. Another consideration is the OS type. You must be using a compatible operating system, and basically this includes Windows 8.1 or higher, which for most people just means use Windows 10. And also Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2 are also supported. And lastly, as I mentioned previously, this feature was released in our 2016 release, so you must use the 2016 version of Smart Client to take advantage of these features. Now let's talk about a few considerations when you're designing the smart client, and some of these will go ahead and relate to hardware acceleration, and some of these are just best practices. Now the first thing that will have an impact, or that I want to talk about that will have an impact on your machine is quantity of monitors. Now something to consider is that if you have more monitors on a machine, it does typically have a slight negative impact on performance. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't necessarily recommend putting multiple monitors on a workstation. That's fine, but this is just something to keep in mind. And again, it's not as big of a factor as putting like 24K cameras on a single monitor or something like that. But it is something that will factor into performance. And this does scale as you go out to more. So having two monitors, showing 4 cameras on each, has better performance than, say, having 4 monitors showing 2 cameras on each. Now, if you do want to put like a video wall up, this is something that Rob had mentioned before, consider utilizing the smart wall feature. Now, this is something that's only supported in Expert and Up. It's included in XProtect Corporate, XProtect Expert. It is an add-on to be able to utilize the smart wall feature, but this is something that can help mitigate performance drop by spreading monitors across multiple PCs rather than putting them all in one. And it's a very, very scalable method of doing this, and it's got a lot of good features that can help manage multiple monitors across the wall. And lastly, this may sound like a given, but it's something that's often not thought about in design, is make sure that the workstation that you're trying to put together actually supports the amount of outputs. I can't tell you how many times I've had an integrator go out to site, and the technician drops the monitor, doesn't even have a video card, has one output in it, and they're trying to hook up like 2 or 3 monitors to it. Yeah, so that's typically not going to work. I mean, you can kind of do different splitters and other methods for getting monitors, but that's really not a good idea, and it's not a recommended approach. Now, on that note of multiple displays, something we do support is multiple NVIDIA cards being used in conjunction with one another. Now, you can actually use each one of these simultaneously. And one really cool trait about our hardware acceleration is the fact that not only can we utilize multiple NVIDIA cards, but we can actually use load balance to the Intel GPU via QuickSync. So the way this works is by default, as one of the video cards starts to run low on resources, the smart client will actually automatically start to load balance to the Intel GPU. But it can also go ahead and support load balancing across multiple NVIDIA cards as well. So And the great thing about this too is that you can actually have just a single monitor hooked up to one of the video cards, and it'll actually utilize all the different video cards to start decoding those different streams in conjunction. And actually, one thing that we have noticed during our testing is that performance is actually better if you limit monitors to a single video card rather than spread them across multiple. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So for instance, you see this, if you have 4 different NVIDIA cards, say you're hooking this up to 4 outputs. If one of those video cards actually has 4 display outputs, hook them all up to one monitor, one video card. And that's kind of our best practice. And lastly, and I actually kind of covered this in the last slide as well, is that not only are we able to load balance across multiple NVIDIA cards, but we can actually load balance between NVIDIA and Intel Quick Sync feature simultaneously. So this is a pretty good differentiator for the Milestone system for our hardware acceleration, is that we can actually utilize both Intel and NVIDIA at the same time for our hardware acceleration. So the way this works is that streams will be load balanced between NVIDIA GPUs, the Intel GPU, and then eventually back just to the Rapier Intel CPU as well. Now, by default, NVIDIA decoding will be prioritized. However, this can be changed in the config file so that you can utilize. So in case if you want to do it for troubleshooting purposes, you can say, all right, I just want to go ahead and do the Intel GPU first, or only do the Intel GPU and ignore NVIDIA video card. So something to keep in mind. Now we're running a bit on our 15 minutes, but one thing I really want to show is how this looks in the video and the actual smart client, and how you can kind of troubleshoot this and make sure that this is enabled. So here we're actually running the smart client, and I want to draw attention to the top left corner of each of these video streams, and you can see that it actually has what we have called the diagnostics overlay. So with the diagnostic overlay, you can see a number of different things. You can see the frame rate of each camera. So I have each of these set for 10 frames. So this is a good way to go ahead and look at it and verify that you're getting roughly a full 10 frame full rate. So it helps make sure that you're not dropping frames. You can see the codec, the resolution, and you can also see the hardware acceleration that it's utilizing. So here you see hardware acceleration, it says NVIDIA. As you scale this out and you start to maximize your NVIDIA cards or GPUs, you'll see that automatically go ahead and change over to Intel for a number of different streams. So this is a really great feature to help troubleshoot and also just to get a good idea of what kind of resources you're using on your machine. Over here at the top right, you can actually click this arrow, and if you go to settings, I can show you exactly how you enable this feature. So if you go to advanced, you'll see over here that video diagnostics overlay. It says currently level 2. Now by default, this will be set to hide. If I hit close, you'll see that's usually what most of the time you'll see when you log into the smart client. And to enable that, you'll just go to video diagnostics overlay, and you can enable levels 1, 2, or 3. Now for level 2, that's generally what I'll recommend. That's what gets you those different features that you had saw before. Level 3 again gets in depth and gets you some more in-depth information about the different streams that are coming in and settings for that. And I'd say that's more used by devs and things like that. Also, for over here, you'll see there's a hardware acceleration feature. If you're not getting hardware acceleration, you see that through the diagnostics overlay that maybe you're seeing that it just says none, or it's not coming through. One thing I'd recommend is to go back to these settings and make sure that it's actually enabled. By default, it should be set to auto. But if somebody changed a few different settings, maybe that's why you're not getting it. But also, you can also disable it in case if you're trying to do so for troubleshooting purposes. Maybe the video card is not working, or the CPU is not working as well. So, and that actually pretty much wraps it up. So I wanted to just leave this references slide up here for you guys, just so that way you can have that. I'll also go ahead and paste that into the chat so you can have that as well. And I want to spend about 10 minutes or so leaving this up to a Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and post that either into the chat or the questions section, and we'll go ahead and go through those. But if there's not any questions, once again, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Well, I don't see a question, but I do see a hello from Ahmed. Here we go. So the question is I've got a question related to the selection of the workstation. Are there any plans of building Milestone branded workstations in the future, similar to Husky series? This is from Ibrahim. Not that I'm aware of. Andrew, have you heard anything of we're not typically or even considering that as far as I know. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's definitely not something that we have on either an external or an internal roadmap. I will say though that we've had a number of different partners that have been very proactive in doing their own testing on our workstations. One that I'll call out that's worked with our team personally is Seneca Data.
Mm-hmm.
They actually have a published white paper that kind of shows some of their testing as well as some recommended hardware. So that's something that I'd like to recommend to go ahead and take advantage of. If you're want to go with something where the solution that will not only just is kind of a all-in-one solution where you can get a product from a vendor, but it's something that's actually been tested and vetted, and they actually know what some of the quirks and recommendations when it comes to our smart client as well.
And I see another question we have from AK. It says, can Milestone send higher frame rate video as the live stream to be decoded with hardware acceleration? Not sure.
Can Milestone send higher frame rate video as the
not quite sure what the question. Can Milestone send higher frame rate video?
Oh, okay. So I think that might be. We do support having multiple streams within the client, so we can have a separate live stream and a separate recorded stream. So the live stream that's coming in, that shouldn't be a problem. If it's like say you're doing live feed at 30 and then recorded feed at 5, 10, 15, whatever. Then the live stream that's coming in that can be decoded with hardware acceleration.
Yeah, I think that was the second part, was with recorded video perhaps being lower frame rate to save on storage. Yes, that's
okay.
Yeah, not so much like necessarily a smart client thing. I'm thinking, but yes, with different settings you can record different frame rates than you're viewing live, and with multiple streams, like Andrew says, yes, different resolutions possibly.
Okay. Also, Sean, good to know. He mentioned that he just had a smart client set up with 5 monitors. Definitely eye opener as to what hardware is required.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, and when it comes to those, I think that's a good point to make too. I mean, Rob mentioned, and I don't have our email up here on the references slide. I really should have. I'll put that in the chat really quick. But anytime you're coming to that, you have a project. Do keep in mind the Smart Client Workstation guide or design, and feel free to reach out to us. We have a team of about 15 now here in the Americas that's just dedicated to basically design pilots and stuff like that. So if anytime you need help putting up a design for a different workstation, like I see one of those as one of the questions here, feel free to reach out to us. Oops. And there's the email for the audience as well.
So I see one here too from Ibrahim. It's have you noticed any performance difference between matching Quadro and GeForce models, since workstations usually come with Quadro cards? Does it justify the price difference in your opinion? I think performance wise, Ibrahim, it's when it comes to this like for like processors or GPUs on the NVIDIA cards, what we've pointed out is that the difference is that the Quadro cards are meant for more of that continuous commercial or industrial type use, as opposed to the GeForce, which is more of a consumer level card, right? So NVIDIA tells us that the Quadros, they run quieter, they run cooler, they're designed to run 24/7, if you will. So those are the ones you might run for your smart walls and that nature. But the Quadro cards, I think performance-wise, we do have some customers that say, they've bought gaming rigs and they run just fine. It just comes down to what your preference is. Are there any plans of releasing a workstation calculator on the website similar to the existing server calculator? I'm not aware of any plans at this point. Andrew, I think you backed up on that one. I don't believe that there's any specific plan for that in the near future.
Yeah, for an actual deliverable for a calculator,
right.
I'm not. I can't say one way or the other. That would definitely be useful. I would say though that it's we've thrown around the idea internally, and there's a lot that needs to go into that, especially when we're putting together a calculator. That's something that indicates something that's going to be more precise. But especially with just the nature, especially factoring in the NVIDIA hardware acceleration,
Right.
we've
There's a lot
noticed
of
that
different
there
possibilities,
are a number of different things.
combinations. Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. So
Between the different Intel CPUs, the different NVIDIA GPUs, that's quite a bit.
yeah, I mean, I will say that we do have a smart client workstation guide that we've created internally from our team that I can send over to you, Ram. And basically, it does show some kind of metrics of benchmarks of basically of what to expect from a performance standpoint for the Intel QuickSync. We don't have anything publicly released yet for the NVIDIA, but that's something that we are working on. So those can kind of help with that, and also in the meantime that is also why I included the pre-sales US and milestone.us email. Feel free to reach out to us for that as well.
And I see lastly, can we expect hardware acceleration support for AMD cards in the future? That's another one where I am not aware of any plans for AMD support in the near future, but that doesn't mean, nothing's impossible. But any thoughts on that, Andrew? If you've heard anything, I haven't.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about that specifically.
Right.
This is actually something that I haven't really researched yet.
Exactly.
For NVIDIA, we worked with them personally to get this developed, as with the Intel QuickSync, because this is utilizing things that it really does take partnerships to develop. So I don't know if AMD actually supports the H.264 decoding feature. They may. So it really come down to working with them hand in hand. But if they do support it, I definitely think that would be great to do. It's always good to have options when you put together workstations or any sort of hardware, really.
All right, everybody. Well, we're 30 minutes in. We appreciate it. We kind of went a little bit long on the 15 minutes, but it was great. Appreciate everybody joining in. Andrew?
But yeah, with that, thank you guys. If you want to put in questions, I believe those should still populate. We'll go ahead and stop the recording here, though. And again, if you have any follow up, either you can do it through this, or feel free to also reach out to our email presalesUS@milestone.us. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.